Well, the reset did work and it was effective, and both sides benefited from that. The United States benefited from Russia's cooperation on Afghanistan, say the Northern Distribution Network, that was particularly valuable during the time when Pakistan essentially barred U.S. NATO transit across its territory. It worked on Iran, where Russia is more collaborative, in fact, than it's usually given credit for in the international media. Both sides profited from the New START Treaty. The Russians profited from the WTO accession, and I would say the Russians profited from the more relaxed atmosphere in their U.S. In their relations with the United States, in particular in the former Soviet space. So it was a success, a qualified success. Well, I think the major challenge is to move ahead, move beyond beyond the low-hanging fruits that were picked during the reset phase. I think we are now standing on a plateau. The horizon is fairly low, and unless people decide that they want to reach higher, they want to achieve more, get more out of the relationship is unlikely to advance way beyond where it is today, and there's a chance that we may slide to, let's say, an inferior quality relationship. Well, there's several issues in which Moscow and Washington can and should collaborate in very random order. Afghanistan, at least until 2014, until the withdrawal of most of U.S. NATO forces from Afghanistan. There's an issue of Iran that requires a degree of collaboration between the two. Syria, the non-collaboration has its costs. There's an issue of missile defense, a very important issue, I think underestimated as far as the importance, the positive importance and the negative importance of that issue is concerned. The things missile defense cooperation can do to help transform the relationship, and the things that a failure to agree in missile defense could contribute to a deterioration of the relationship beyond where either side wants it to be. The Arctic. I think that the United States in particular would benefit from an outreach to Russia in the Asia-Pacific region. I think the Russians would benefit from an outreach to the United States to help develop its own portion that lies next to the Pacific and within Asia, within the Asian part of the Russian Federation. So there are a few things, quite a few things actually, that warrant a closer U.S.-Russian collaboration. Well, there are things that are atmospherically important, and there are things that are materially important. The atmospherics, I think, will be driven very much by the developments, domestic developments in Russia, and the reaction to those developments in the United States. Just to give you one example, the Magnitsky Act and the reaction to the Magnitsky Act in Russia, and of course various developments within Russia that get reported in the United States and engender American public reaction to this or that development. But those are the atmospherics. I don't think that they have enough potential to derail the relationship in a big way. If, however, and this is not something that may happen within the next few years, if, let's say, missile defense cooperation does not materialize, and instead the United States proceeds, but we're talking about beyond 2020, proceeds with deploying some systems in Europe that the Russians would see as threatening as far as their strategic nuclear arsenal is concerned, I think we can see a more serious and more negative dynamic in the relationship. There may be other things. There may be a serious backlash in Russia in case the United States adopts a more proactive attitude toward the developments in Syria, if the United States is more deeply involved in the Syrian civil war, if there is a strike against Iran that could have implications for U.S. Russia relations, among other things. Whether that will be enough to derail the relationship, it will certainly lead to a new calculus in Moscow as far as U.S. foreign policy is concerned. Well, I think the Russian developments impact the relationship considerably, especially the atmospherics of the relationship, especially the environment, the public media environment in which the relationship is exercised. And I would not minimize, although I talk about the atmospherics, I did not minimize the impact of the atmospheric deterioration on the relationship itself. We need to recognize that Russia is in a different historical phase as of late 2011. There are many things that have gone unstuck in Russia. Russia is on the move. There's what my colleagues and I call the Russian awakening. A lot of forces in Russia with a very different ideological persuasion, very different social status. They become aroused. The old political status quo, which essentially allowed Mr. Putin to rule on behalf of the entire Russian society, minus a few dissenters. This is passé. This is history. Something very interesting, something very important, potentially dangerous, potentially promising is taking place in Russia. This gets reported in the United States, and there is clearly a pretty negative attitude toward the Russian government, toward Mr. Putin personally, and this cannot simply have no impact on the relationship, on the U.S. policy toward Russia, and on the reaction to that policy from the Kremlin. So expect more of an impact, I think, as developments in Russia will continue to be more dynamic, progressively more dynamic, and it's going to be tough. I think it's something that has a degree of unpredictability to it. It's interesting that the foreign policy piece that heralded the United States pivot to Asia, the article by Secretary Clinton, did not mention Russia once. It mentioned a lot of countries in the Asia-Pacific region, but did not mention Russia. And yet, I would say it does impact Russia's view of the United States. It does impact Russia's own policy in Asia and the Pacific. I think the Russians are also pivoting in their own way, mostly domestically. They're pivoting toward Asia. They have recognized that they are most vulnerable in that part of the country. It's not the North Caucasus. Whether the North Caucasus is quiet or restless, it has an enormous impact within Russia, but it's not an issue whether Russia will continue to exist or not. On the other hand, if Russia fails to develop the Far Eastern regions that directly about the Pacific Ocean and Siberia, which is home to most of Russia's natural resources, if it fails to develop those regions, if they become simply an add-on to the major economies of Asia, starting with China, then you will be dealing with a very different Russia. And that is something that's understood in one way or another by the leadership of Russia. So they are paying more attention to the region. It's not. It's important that the APEC summit last September was held in Vladivostok, Russia, rather than, let's say, in St. Petersburg or Moscow, where, of course, you have far better infrastructure and the far better international connections. And yet, the decision was made very purposefully to have the meeting close to close to Asia. In fact, in the territory which is geographically part of Asia. So there is a growing interest within Russia in the development of Russia's provinces, but also an interest in how Russia relates to other countries, starting with China. And the United States, of course, is also there. It's a Pacific power. It's very much present in Asia. And it's seen in Moscow in a different way than the United States in Europe. I would say it's seen more in less as a threatening, less as a threatening factor, less as a country that is invading Russia's former imperial turf. It's seen more as a country that is an essential element of the balance in the region.